Hi guys, in this video I want to go over the data types in R. And in R you're going to be dealing with objects like vectors, matrices, data frames, arrays, and there's going to be data in those objects. The data can either be character data, like text, like the word hello, or other text. It can be integer data, like the number 2, and I'll explain what this L means in a second. It can be numeric data, and numeric meaning the data has decimal points, or it has decimal values. It can be logical data like true or false, and it also can be complex data, so complex numbers. And here's a complex number. So in R, it's very, very simple to deal with all these objects and all this data. You just have an object. Here my object is called X, and you assign something to that object. And to assign, you use the backwards arrow, which is the less than sign with a dash. And you then put what you want in that object, whether it's a character, integer, numeric, logical, or complex, and R will do everything for you. Basically, it will say, it'll take in this data, and it will say, okay, now your object contains whatever you assign to it. So in this code here that you see, I have this object X, and first thing I'm going to do is assign the word hello to it. And then I'm going to print out X. And if by printing out, I just mean I'm going to type the object's name in this source window, and it'll print it out. So if I run these two lines of code here, if I highlight them and go up here and click run, it ran those two lines of code, and it assigned hello to X, and then it printed it out here. And notice what it printed out. It printed out the word hello, which is what we wanted, but then over here it printed out 1 in square brackets. The 1 is because in R everything is considered a vector at a base level. So everything that you assign to an object is being assigned to a vector. And if you assign only one thing to the object, it's a vector of length 1, and that's why you see here the number 1, because it's saying in this vector X, X is our vector, at the first element, the first index, is the word hello. So that's what this 1 in brackets mean. Now if we run these other lines of code, so I could just highlight all this and click run, or I could just do Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm just going to click Control-Shift-Enter, and I printed out all the lines of code. And here we are. Here you can see what we printed out. Here we have hello, and that was printed. And then we printed an integer. And here you can see I assigned 2L to the object X, my vector X. And it printed out 2. Now why did I put L here? Well, because in R, if you want integers, you need to put L next to the number. If you don't, it's going to go in as a numeric type of object. What do I mean by that? Well, let's see. To see what the data type of the object is, you can use the function class. So I'm going to put the function class, and then inside the parentheses of the function, I'm going to put the name of my object. So I'm going to put class X. And if I just run these 3 lines of code here where I assign 2 to the vector X, and I click run, you'll see here it printed out, here's what I did. I assigned 2 to the vector X, and there's 2, but notice the class of X is numeric. It's because by default R likes numeric things. It defaults to a numeric data type. If you want it to be integer, explicitly integer, then you have to put the L there. And now if I run this again, notice I assigned 2L to X. It printed out 2, but now the class is integer. Versus up here, the class was numeric, right? So I assigned 2 in both cases, but here when I added the L, the class was integer. Here the class is numeric. In general, you're going to be fine using numeric data. So you can just leave the L off. But if you really want integers, you can use L. And take note of this class function because it's going to come in handy at some point in your career using R, because you're going to want to know what type of data you're dealing with. Whether it's, you have a matrix and you want to know what type of data is in column 3, you can use this class function to do that. So now let's continue. We have numeric data that we're assigning to X. We have logical data we can assign to X. Notice when you assign logical data, meaning true or false, it only has 2 values, true or false. The true is in all caps. Make sure you do put the true in all caps. Or if you assign false to it, the false has to be in all capital letters. So let's just run all this again. And I'm just going to comment out this class here. And let's just run our code. I'll just do Control-Shift-Enter. And here's what you see. All we're doing is assigning data to our vector X. Or, what is our object we're working with? It's a vector. And it's a vector of length 1 in all these cases. And you can see, whatever we assign to it, based on what we put in, R puts it in a vector at the first element. And you can see it does that for everything. It prints out 1, and then, because that's the first element, and then whatever we put in. And if I were to, use this class X all over, so if I were to do this, so you could see what the class is of each of these things. And if I run it now, look what happens here. So it's just telling us very simply that, this first vector we used that we assigned hello to is a character. The next one that we did 2L, well, that's an integer. That's what comes out of this class function. When we assign false to our vector here, right here, oops, sorry. When we assign false to our vector here, the class is logical. When we assign a complex number to our vector, the class is complex. So that's it for this video. One thing to keep in mind and to remember is that the base object in R is a vector, and that's why these 1 in square brackets is coming up. And we'll see in the next video when we turn these things into vectors, how that looks. And then later on we'll turn them into matrices and data frames and all the rest. So that's it for this video. In the next video we'll go over vectors.